response to the insights from the various groups. And then some final words of thank you to everybody, and we'll try to get you out of here as close to 2 as we can. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for doing such an amazing job in finding their places, and thank you to all of the volunteers and especially facilitators. And so now if you can just hear from each of the groups, you come to the mic there and just share the insight that you from your group.
Hi, my name is Ellie Joansu. I'm a PhD student in education at SFE. Our group, what really came to the forefront was how amazingly complex and varied the concept of compassion is, and how we each bring our own stories to that. And it was always sort of a very privilege to be able to continue the storytelling that happened here, as those stories are what animate where we are in the world. And
Thank you.
I think my name is Cynthia Turley, and we started with the microcosm of the individual, the microcosm of the individual, sort of moved out from there. Again, shared stories on various different levels, but initially around this notion of having the courage to look into the dark places in ourselves and own up to them, because it's only through having the compassion and befriending that dark side in ourselves that we will then stop projecting it out there. We move from there just to a whole other variety of areas of the family, schools, and the necessity for education with young children, and those kinds of programs of which I'm assuming is going to be, is happening, teaching compassion in the schools. And then finally, where does one get the wisdom to speak truth with compassion? This idea of we see someone kicking a dog, how do we address that without demonizing the person? And we can imagine that on nation-to-nation level. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And our next group is.
Hi everyone, I'm Arti Arzugam. I'm a psychology and women and gender studies major in undergrad. This is my personal summarization of our group talk. What I got out of it was to actually put yourself in other people's shoes, and by that being kind towards them, and most importantly to walk your talk, to actually apply what we have learned today, what we have realized today. So that's it from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mark. I think the key message from our group was that our discussion was messy. I did appreciate what Cynthia said, wherever she went, about the dark side. That also came up in our conversation as well, that in order to engage in a compassionate act, there is kind of a self-giving in some way to touch parts of life that are chaotic. And when engaging in real dialogue, perhaps compassionate interreligious dialogue, there is a place where you get to where you feel uncomfortable, and you need to be able to do that and recognize that you're feeling uncomfortable, and you need to be willing to engage in that public conversation. And that leads into the other major theme, I think, that was in our discussion, was around the public-private distinction in Western society, and that there needs to be a kind of a reimagined vision of public dialogue and engaging in community, joining community, because increasingly in the Western sense, we're increasingly individualized in our private spaces, and that compassion actually requires that you enter into a relationship, not just engage in a relationship. So I think that covers it. So there's lots more.
So I'm Echo Sirotnik. I'm the Zen Buddhist chaplain of UBC. Our group dealt with, I would call it the wisdom and the action side of compassion. The wisdom side, we looked very much at what is the nature of self and other. And all of us said in one way or feeling for the other. We are the other. And on the action side, we talked about, in many ways, the frustration. Well, what can I as an individual do? Frustration that everybody feels that. And the key point that came out of that in our discussion is, as one person put it in a story, you clear the path on which you walk. In other words, your action is before you at every moment of your life.
My name is Jessa, Sheila. We heard a lot of really wonderful stories and reflections in our small group, and I think we're going to talk about one particular story that was shared and talk about how it sort of functions as a metaphor for what a lot of what we're taking away from today, as well as an action item that we can think about. So it was a story about, actually it was my story, something that I experienced last week. I was sitting on a bus and I saw someone who was different from me, but not so different. And I guess sort of before I finished that thought, I engaged in a conversation with that person. And so I brought that story up because it really reminded me of one of the key points that I'm taking away today, which is communication, and how if we're looking to kind of understand the similarities that we share, we really need to learn a person's name and learn their story.
And for myself, it's similar to the bus experience where it's thank you. It's taking that bus every day to UBC from my home and noticing how just that moment of paying attention to who's around you, you can practice compassion by offering that seat to whoever needs it the most. It doesn't matter if it's young or old, if it's someone, a young person with a lot of belongings and bags, give it up. There you go, compassion is action.
Hello, my name is Sean Slattery, and I'm a certificate student here at the EST. Our group spent a lot of time sharing stories. And I think there were 4 elements to these stories that came out really strongly in our group. First, the importance of having a strong sense of place. We heard that this morning, and it got repeated again in our group. That's a key element to having a compassionate sense of where you are before you can begin to really get a sense of who you should be and how you want to relate to others. Second and third elements that came out are closely related. One is being present, being totally present when you're with someone with whom you wish to intervene into some kind of a dialogue. And again, Karen referred to some of the elements that can get in the way of that, which I won't repeat now, but being in the presence. And this is critical to listening. And to me, that's one of the toughest skills you can acquire. I've done it because I've done some professional mediation. It's a very tough thing to really, really listen, which means not just with the ears, but with the eyes, watching body language, watching everything. And the third element is another, this came out so strongly, is the importance to really be able to enter into a compassionate relationship with someone else, is being totally prepared to hear their stories. Without that storytelling and the story listening, compassion simply cannot occur. So these were the 4 elements that came out of our group today.
Hi, my name is Abigail, and I'm from one of the pink circular groups, but our color belies the intensity of our conversation. We were not at all fuzzy and soft and warm. We were intensely interested in the overarching questions of compassion. In fact, our group was mostly made up of asking questions and listening to those questions. And it seemed we were interested in the thinking and the feeling that goes before the action of compassion. What is it about? In a sense, what is the awareness that is the foundation of every compassionate act? Or what is the foundation of awareness in every compassionate act? And does that change all the time or not? One of our questions was, do children naturally carry compassion? Another question was, if I was in this crisis situation, it was the Holocaust in this particular conversation, what would I do as a person of my faith? What would I do as a human being? Another question had to do with power. And there was some concern about being compassionate at inappropriate times, eroding a sense of power. Now that's a really difficult question. So it had to do with how can I be compassionate without being walked over? Hard one. So that's us, the pink group. Thank you.
My name is Sheila Wax, and we've had a very varied conversation. We decided to sum it up as compassion is not a default. Compassion is an intention, a moment-by-moment intention, and I love the idea of clearing the path before us. Compassion is to ourselves, to everyone around us, and to the planet. So, why the blazes are we drinking water out of plastic bottles at a compassionate cinema? Thank you.
Just a quick word about the water bottles. We actually did have a debate about it. We have extra bottles which are part of our earthquake safety kits, and we decided to make the really difficult decision about the plastic bottles which we will be recycling because we were concerned about people tripping with cups that would be spilling water as they were walking around. So we had to balance safety in this particular instance and commitment to recycling. So, but you're absolutely right, it is an important issue which we do struggle with. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm a shelter support worker with Women on the Downtown East Side. So our group started out by asking some difficult questions about moments currently in history where people have an absolute lack of care. For example, the Holocaust, and someone posed the question of how that can be generated when someone really just doesn't give a care. And one of the many views brought forward is how compassionate action is often construed as being like really difficult and like not a lot of fun, and like we should all do more of it, but no one really wants to. And I certainly receive a lot of that with the work I do. People are like, "Oh, it's so great! Like, yeah, we should do something like that." And, you know. But really realizing that when we have the values in place, like the values of dignity, values of inclusivity, of humanity, I think action is a direct result out of upholding values. And when we uphold the values that we have, it feels amazing. It feels really pleasurable, and we're all seeking pleasure. And I mean, I think this link between joyfulness coming out of compassion is one that most people in our society don't have. And I think that's something that, as that evolves, it could just be a much more beautiful world.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Sabina Jaffer, and this is my newfound friend Paul, who said he'd stand right by me and show compassion. So my group selected me to speak on our group's behalf. I was like, And so he showed compassion and gave me that strength, and I think that's part of the big question: what is compassion? And that's what we delved into in our group is what is compassion. And we found that at the heart of compassion is experiences. And I'm an educator, and I spend my days and nights, because I'm a mother of 4, with kids. And we talked about, the aspect that there are children who don't show compassion. It should be something so natural and ingrained, and why is that? And we talked about experiences. I shared a story, which I'd like to share with you, at the request of my group. As I mentioned to you, I'm an educator. I work at a Muslim school in Richmond, number 5 Road. And we are very blessed and fortunate because there are many other places of worship along number 5 Road, also called Highway to Heaven. And so we have, just steps away from our school, we have the Jewish Day School. And 3 years ago, we engaged in a basketball tournament between the Muslim school and the Jewish day school. And kids still remember that 3 years. And so that's experiences, and that's what our group talked about, is how experiences enrich the notion of compassion.
Hello, compassionate people. My name is Mohammed Algar. I'm a graduate student here at the School of Journalism. I'm an international student from Egypt and Bahrain. So our group had quite an interesting discussion, I think. I just want to tell you some of the points quickly. So we thought when it comes to compassion, education is very important. And by that, we also thought that all of us can be teachers, right? By teaching a little bit more about compassion, by acting compassionately, people will learn from us. The second point is intuition and instinct. A lot of times you do get that little, little motivation there to help someone or ask them if they're really okay or do something for someone else, but then things come in the way, like social awkwardness, God knows I have that. Or some other things come in the way and then you hesitate, and sometimes that moment is gone. So I think it's important to grasp that moment, because I think it's a very big part of what makes us all the same, what makes us all human, having that instinct to reach out. Let's see. Another thing is how I found, at least as an international international student coming here from the Middle East, is that religion sometimes is quite a taboo here, and that also it's one of the points where it's okay to discriminate against, because I come here and taught about political correctness and what's okay and what's not, but then you sit at a dinner table and they make fun of the Catholic person, right? So that's okay, it seems, but nothing else is in Canada. So let's maybe try to move beyond that, but there are things you can learn from religion, I think. Another thing is, I was thinking about the situation in Egypt and in the Middle East right now, right? And there's such polarized societies. In Egypt, there's for example, the Coptic Christians and the Muslims, and there's historic tension there, and the government has used that as well, and things have happened, and propaganda, and it's really, they try to hammer it into your mind, right? So how do you get over that, and how do you instill this, importance of compassion when you have to get over so many barriers and get over so many things? So, we thought small acts, at least, to begin with, smiling at people, helping out, just acting compassionately might start some sort of spark. Also forgiveness, which I think that forgiveness, or lack of forgiveness, so holding on to that anger and also this feeling of not trusting other people can really come in the way, I think, of being compassionate. So those are two things, small acts of forgiveness, that I think we should focus on. And just another thing is, personally, now I'm moving away from my group, but personally, it was really interesting for me today. So first of all, look at us here. It's Canada, so it still shocks me how diverse it is. But we're all very different. We all talk, and we're all from different backgrounds and different educational fields and stuff like that. Yet we're all here, and we're talking about the same thing, and we care about the same thing. So there's always this thread, right, of humanity. Okay, my two last points is, so personally, I really appreciate having the chance to feel a lot of my own stereotypes and own biases weighed down to it, right? Because growing up in Bahrain, where I grew up, it's a very small country, majority Muslim and stuff like that. We don't really have discussions like this. And unfortunately, with the government propaganda and the mistrust and everything, these crazy stereotypes form. I'm ashamed of even bringing them up, but today helped. Things like this helped to melt them away, right? Because we're all up here, and the stories at their core are all the same. Do you know what I mean? And finally, I just wanted to also say I really enjoyed it here today. I didn't notice for the past year and a half, I came to this realization, but for the past year and a half, since I've come to Canada and left the Middle East, I didn't realize how whenever there's a discussion about Islam, how tense I get, how I clench my fists, how I feel defensive and wait for that moment where I have to defend what the person's saying because it's a misunderstanding. So today was the first time I felt fist unclenched, I felt myself relaxing, and it's truly the first time I felt respected in that sense. So thank you all very much.
We laid this smorgasbord out on the table where we were gathered and we ate from it. At the head of the menu were stories. We're a storytelling species, and it's stories about exemplifying what it is to be human, stories that show us how. The key to our stories seem to be looking at our own experience and those times and places where we felt welcome, and the times and places where we felt unwelcome. And we wondered, what does business know that those who claim to know have either forgotten or are ignoring?
Hi, my name is Michelle Robert. I'm a PhD student at SFU. And our group shared different stories, and we were talking about how many times we have an opportunity to change one people's life, and I'm going to share one of these stories. I was working as a teacher in Mexico, and I had a very, very poor son. And I had two sisters with me, who were my students, and her mother was expecting a baby, and she had a boy. So during the winter was a very hard winter time that time. And the baby got sick and died. And the mother was very, very sad and crying. But the worst for her was that the newspaper published that another victim of the winter was died. So she was feeling horrible because she told me that she was taking good care of the baby and the baby got sick, so she kind of they're blaming her, right? So I went to the newspaper CEO to talk to him and explain the situation. And I asked him to publish another note to say that that was a mistake, the first one. He said, why? So I tell the story and say, I'm begging you. So he did that. He published the story. And the mother was, she lost their baby, but was thrilled that the newspaper published again the story that it wasn't their fault. So tiny things like that it took me half an hour, changed their life forever. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie McCracken, and I also brought a compassion partner with me so that I didn't have to stand it here alone. We talked about many things in our group, and one story that I told I think resonated with some people, and we got a really nice conversation out of it. And that was a friend of mine who does not have any particular religious background, has a 7-year-old son. And as they're walking down the street, they see a very poor homeless man on the side of the street, and the boy is looking very visibly disturbed by it, and saying, Mommy, what's wrong with that man? How come he has the dirty clothes, and how come he's asking for change from people, like is he sick or something? And the mother very much like trying to explain to him what is poverty, and how this man is like her or different. And he got very, very quiet and didn't say much about it. But she said that he was very disturbed for the next 24 hours. And the next morning, as they were making their lunches for school and work that day, he said, Mommy, can we make an extra sandwich for that guy in case we see him again? And it made me think, and someone else has already touched on it with the issue of children, is compassion an innate quality that we're all born with? And if so, is it something that we have to nurture, or is it something that we lose along the way? And we know that children can make things very magical, and things that seem very ordinary and very simple to the adult can appear to be very magical for the child. So I'm almost wondering if compassion is a magical quality that somehow later on in life we get some blinders put on and lose the magic of compassion.
And we had a wide variety of responses to that, and we all seemed to like this young gentleman's response.
Yeah, my name is Silas. So after discussing whether it is children have it innate in them or it's something that they need to be taught, we talked about how we as adults can teach our children and be honest with them. And then we wondered why the world is the way it is today. Why do we see it in, why is it such a harsh reality? And I put forward the idea that we grow hard as we become older. We grow hard against our experiences, against those who have hurt us. We try and push away that pain rather than looking for compassionate people to release our pain to. And so when we're hard, and then how do we break that down? How do we reignite a sense of compassion in us? And we talked in the last few minutes about a sense of the divine, a sense where we can put that pain, where we can release that pain so that we can be compassionate again, or a sense of the divine in another person and being able to accept the compassion they offer you. Because we talk that it's hard for us to accept compassion as well as it is to give it. So through our life, we change from doing unto others how we want to be treated to doing to others how we have been treated. And we play tit for tat rather than compassion and empathy.
We looked at the difficulties involved in letting go of oneself and possibly be proven wrong, and the necessity in meeting people different from themselves and finding some similarities and not just focusing on how they're different. And lastly, we looked at the difficulty in finding ways to act on compassion and use it as a way to change our society rather than just push what we feel is the right course on other people as we see this happen so often.
Thank you all. That was a very rich feast. And I'd now like to invite Carmen Armstrong to return to podium to share some thoughts and response.
Well, there have been some marvelous responses here. And I think what stands out for me is that question of the visiting the dark side, not projecting it onto other people. The importance of looking out every day, all day and every day, for something that you can do, that you can do. Religion being a bit of a taboo here. It certainly is in the UK. And I was very touched by the young man from Egypt who felt for the first time able to relax. Various things came up about what would we have done, say, in the Holocaust. We'll never know. We'll never know what we would have done. We might know what we think we might like to have done, but we've done it. We'll never know. But we are living in a pretty tough time now. This is a time when we need integrity and courage and to get active. There's a lot of international tension. There's a lot of we have misapprehensions about one another. I wrote a piece for the Globe about Islamophobia. I was put on their web page on Monday, and I haven't seen it, but I was told last night on the radio that the responses, some of them have been appalling. So we've got to remember that, and I often, when I do this kind of thing, I sometimes feel I've made things worse because the atmosphere is now more polluted than before I wrote that article, because these ideas are being enunciated and spoken. So this is also a time of testing for all of us. And the international situation is terrible. We've had that hideous shooting in France. We've had that young serviceman in Afghanistan going berserk. We've had a Quran burning just, within the last month. So this is the time to stand up and say, now, here we are. This, what in Islam it was called a time of fitna. This is a time of trial, where we know what we're made of. And we've got a job on our hands to address today's problems. And how do you speak? We need a new discourse, I think, in us like that, and I think that came up. How do we conduct private and public discourse? How do we, stop someone not beating a dog? I have a little checklist in my mind. I go through Paul's letter for charity. Charity is patient, is kind. Charity is not puffed up. Very often when people are inveighing against something that they feel very passionate about, really saying how dreadful it is, you can almost see them swelling before your eyes with sort of self-congratulation. Charity takes no delight in the wrongdoing of others. Some people, their lips seem to be smacking the way when they denounce something that they disapprove of. Gandhi said that when you are making a point or standing up for what you know is right, you must ask yourself whether you're speaking in order to make the situation better, to help, or to punish, to injure. And I think somehow, I've said this before, that I've been to so many, been giving so many lectures these last 12 days, that some of you may have heard me say this before. Dialogue is one of the catchwords of our time. And there's a sort of belief that if we would only all engage in dialogue, peace would break out. But there's not much Socratic dialogue going on. Socrates in the West, the founder of the Socratic Western national tradition, and inventor of the dialogue form for us. People who came to Socrates usually thought they knew what they were talking about. But after half an hour of his relentless questioning, they found they didn't know the first thing about basic issues. And at the end of each dialogue, you have all the participants, including Socrates himself, scratching their heads and saying, "We don't know anything." And at that point, Socrates said, "You become a philosopher." Because we are so omniscient in our society. We think we've got a lot of information, we click a mouse and up comes a whole lot of information. We're deluged with news and opinions, talk shows, and we talk about one another in a very omniscient way. Well, the trouble with her is, as though you could sum up the extraordinary mystery of every single human being in a sentence. Or, oh, well, the trouble with Islam is. And really, you can't sum up a complex, ancient tradition like that in a single sentence. And often it's based on people form opinions now, we're encouraged to do so quite rightly, that on a half-remembered op-ed piece here or an interview there, remember what we don't know. So no one could ever win a Socratic dialogue, because everybody realized at the end they didn't know anything at all. And Socrates said nobody must ever be pushed to a place where he doesn't want to go. At every point, the conversation must be conducted, he said, gently, in a manner appropriate to discourse. Now, so much of our discourse is about winning. In academia even, I don't know why I say even, in academia, in politics, in the media, in religious dialogue, it's not enough for us to seek the truth. We also have to defeat and humiliate and discredit our opponents. We've got to win. Well, our faith is better, my party is better than yours. We're in a position now where I don't think we know what to do. So many of the things we took for granted, we thought we got all beautifully sewn up, like our financial institutions. Our foreign policy, whatever, the way we are conducting our foreign policy in Western countries, in Britain at least, certainly, well, it certainly isn't working. Just look at what's happened in the last 10 years. A disaster. And so, we don't know what really to do about the environment. Look at this impasse we had about the plastic bottles. What do we do? And we know something's got to be done. But this is where we need to divest ourselves of all this certainty. And realise that the Taoists had a phrase that said it was good. They called it the art of forgetting. Forgetting what you think you know. That's a sort of Socratic thing too. And then coming with a fresh mind, a humble mind, to deal with the situation. And when we inveigh against something aggressively, it makes matters worse. Every single fundamentalist movement that I've studied in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is rooted in a profound fear. And often that fear hardens into rage, but it is rooted in fear. And it's also clear that from history shows that when these movements are attacked in any way, either in a vicious media campaign or with guns, they almost invariably become more extreme. So attacking, it will only make matters worse. So here we are now. Please, when you leave the hall, don't just go out there saying something inspiring sounding like, now from this day forward I'm going to bring light and joy into the life of every person that I meet. Because you can't. Think of something concrete, something absolutely clear. You may want to form a group. You may want to make your college or university a compassionate college. And the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, I find them, there's a trip off the tongue. They won't try the letters. But they'll be there to help you. And go on the website and find out how these things are done. Make a core team, perhaps form a team of core activists to deal with something in your community that needs attention. And look around your own private world too. Look around your family. Is there something that needs to be done there that you can do to make that family function better? Your school, your workplace, then your city. How are things in Vancouver or wherever you live? We're trying to make Vancouver a compassionate city. Perhaps you'd like to join that campaign. And then don't forget the world outside your country. Try now to cultivate a global awareness, a global curiosity and realizing that the pain we see worldwide is our business, our responsibility. We have, as the Buddhists say, to resolve to do everything we can to assuage the immense pain that we have in our world. Don't forget the global. We've got to start thinking as a global society of other peoples. Vancouver, look how many different nationalities there are right here in this room. This is a global society now. And we have also, someone said, to listen to people's stories even when it's hard to do so, even when it contradicts a deeply felt story of our own. Listen to the pain in the stories and resolve to do something about it. Feel unquiet about it when you encounter suffering. It's been a really great day. I do hope you all go out there realizing what one person can do to change the world. It can be done, but only if we work hard and get at it. Thank you very much.
Armstrong for her generosity in time and in thought and in energy and in spirit. It's been really illuminating and delightful. And I know I'm not the only one who will thinking a lot about this visit in the years to come. We have a little presentation for you, which I'm going to ask my colleague, Theology, to help me in presenting. And as Alita's coming up here, I just want to tell you that thanks to support from Service Canada, Theology was able to devote a great many hours to her position as Youth Leadership Coordinator to do an enormous amount of work to plan and coordinate every detail of this conference with a terrific team, her core team, Elise Brazel, Kevin Shebb, Udo Hartman, and Shiva Oye, and many, many, many volunteers. This conference came together. But I particularly want to ask you to join me in thanking Theology for all this. And it's a piece of a work of craft of indigenous art, which you can wear. There are many volunteers. There's so many that I'm afraid if I read the dozen names that I will remember, I'll forget a few. And so I just want to thank all of the volunteers. I want to thank all of the staff, the students, the staff, the faculty, administrators here at Vancouver School of Theology who put down all the many things that they don't have time to get to and really put themselves out to make this conference happen. We cannot thank you sufficiently for all that you did. I want want to thank Simon Fraser University, the Center for Dialogue in particular, for making this possible. Karen Armstrong, Mark Winston, the names come to mind. Many shared qualities. Mark Winston, a cherished friend and colleague and an amazing figure in this community. Director of the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University, and his amazing team, Rob and Brenda, who are here, and Linda, who is not here. Thank you for everything that you've done to make this work. I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Rosa Sevi, our postdoctoral fellow and program coordinator, who pitched in all kinds of ways, as she always does. Our interns, Kevin Sheh and Farah Khan, who convened our UBC campus Armstrong Book Club. And not only do I want to thank Simon Fraser University for making this event possible, but also, and people laughed about this when I mentioned it last week, because it might seem to be amusing, but I'm quite serious. It really was generous of SFU to let us have this event here on this campus. And on behalf of everyone at the University of British Columbia, with which I am affiliated in a few different ways in a few minutes, I want to thank the people at Simon Fraser University on behalf of UBC as well. So please UBC also, like SFU, really put out the word, as did many universities and colleges, to promote the conference. It was on listservs sent out to administrative units, to departments, to faculties. UBC put it on the Thunderbird Stadium billboard, and it was on monitors in the library, and really the universities promoted it, and that's why we had students from 14 universities and colleges across Canada here. I want to thank our facilitators, and their names I will read, if you don't mind, because they put so many hours into preparing this facilitation. Elise Breslin, of course, who coordinated them, Max Serco, Wade Lifton, Eddie Land, Chelsea Mastering, Leah Silver, Angela Penn, Kristen Tolentino, Marissa Lawrence, Nicole Yaros, Asmina Kassam, Jessica O'Neill, Keenan Tannehill Davies, Sylvia Mora, Ellen Budenko, Claudia Neubauer, and Sarita Talbot. Please join me in thanking them. Sponsors in 12 days, all the different organizations, so I won't read their names again. I want to once more acknowledge our storytellers, beginning, of course, with Elder Larry Grant from the Musqueam community, who gave his time. Of course, Smagat Leek, Chief Joseph Gosnell, our visiting Silver Scholar, for sharing his story with us, and all of our storytellers from various traditions. Jolana Bighorn, Dr. Michael Ling, Reverend Dr. Stephen Ferris, Dr. Gira Bach, Magidash, Shoshana Littman, Mary Lagani, and Palvinder Sherpa. Please join me in thanking. And finally, just an invitation to you to join in the work that we're doing here at Pacific. We're only about 2.5 years old, but already, as you can see, there's a lot of interest in finding ways for people to meet each other across ethno-religious boundaries that aren't ordinarily transgressed, aren't ordinarily crossed. People of goodwill will not necessarily bump into each other. And we're out there. You're out there. And we need to have a place where we can meet and work together. So whether it's our programs, scholarly research, our teaching nature, an initiative of one kind or another, or with our research associates or affiliates, our classes, a visiting scholar program like this, or like the visit by Professor Robert Alter of Berkeley, coming at the end of April 30th and May 1st, one of the leading scholars on biblical translation, biblical narrative, form and meaning in the book of Job, and a tremendous opportunity. Or perhaps you're interested in science fiction and would like to take a course for a week in July that our center is offering under the umbrella of EST's amazing summer school program. Professor Hussein Ishami, a specialist in Islamic art and architecture at UBC's Kelowna campus, Professor Francisco Peña, who's an expert in Christian literary traditions, myself focusing in Jewish tradition, a course on science fiction and the religious imagination, looking at the problem of evil through the lens of science fiction. So if you're interested in that or any of our programs, go to our website. Please contact us. Be in touch with us. We'd really like to know who you are. If you're interested in a community initiative, a research-driven community initiative, please let us know. If you're interested in our youth leadership programs, please be in touch with us. A lot of exciting plans and a lot of energy, but we could use more people to help us to implement that vision. So please do get in touch with us if you have something you would like to share, and you can be part of shaping the program. Iron Pacific has become what it has become in the last 2 years because of the contributions of people like Olia Huji, Rosa Sevi, and so many people out here. And certainly we have all been changed by the visit of all of our distinguished guests and storytellers, facilitators, Karen Armstrong, and by your presence. I hope you'll work with us so that we can find a way to implement some of your vision of what an interreligious center of this campus and in this city this time could do to contribute to making this a better world. Thank you so much.